So this message here is very specific. It's for those that either were, or for those who either are or were on the kingdom spouse journey at one point in time, and you were dealing with a counterfeit, as in not in your world, like you didn't have a counterfeit, you were loyal and true to your kingdom spouse, but your kingdom spouse had counterfeits, specifically one in particular, whether that was your kingdom spouse's ex or somebody else that was trying to go against you and purposely tried to get with your kingdom spouse, or maybe it was a friend of your kingdom spouse that, you know, someone in the background, something like that. But I'll get more into that as we go. But like I said, this is a very specific message that the Lord gave me today in regards to those who either are currently or were, as in the Lord removed you from your kingdom spouse journey. And there was a counterfeit, several counterfeits, but one or two in specific particular that were a wedge during the duration of a portion of your kingdom spouse journey / relationship. Okay. So I'm going to get into more details. So this message here would resonate with anybody who comes to it who checked out my last kingdom spouse messages, the ones I put out over the course of like the last month or two, when the Lord's given them to me. If this message resonates, I suggest you check out those ones. And if you have already checked out those ones, then this one should also resonate, because it's basically in sequence of like a timeline, right? So I had put out a word, I'm not sure now, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, talking about how, or maybe not even that long ago, I can't remember, I think it was like 2 weeks ago. Anyways, whatever. The title says basically something to the effect of that, unfortunately, your kingdom spouse chose the devil. Okay, so like I said, I'm not going to get into like all the details in this message of those past ones, because those ones are quite lengthy and it already explains it up to this point extensively in those past videos. But in this one here, so if you checked out my last message that I put out a week or two ago in regards to that your kingdom spouse chose the devil's path over God's, then this message should resonate with you. And if you're new and you haven't checked out that video yet, then like I say, this message here would apply to those who have been on the kingdom spouse journey and you had a counterfeit trying to wedge themselves in the middle. Okay, so now this message can fit, just like all my other past kingdom spouse words, for men dealing with women or women dealing with men. Okay, it can go both ways. It's not just for women. However, like, it just goes to whoever it fits for, whoever it resonates. However, I speak about such topic from the context of a female perspective, simply because of the fact that I'm female. So if you're a female listening, then it should be fairly straightforward. But if you're a male listening and you're like, those circumstances do apply to you, this message should also resonate for you, possibly, but just switch it, like, you know what I mean, like, just put yourself in the context of what, as the leader, like, so if you're like the one, that has a close relationship with the Lord, whether you're male or female, and you were loyal and true to your spouse, you were the real deal, you weren't backstabbing them, betraying them, lying on them, you were taking care of them, you were helping them, you were trying to be fill them up spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally. Like, if you really were the true blue spouse for them, like their blessing, their gift, then this will apply for you, right? So your spouse, if, again, I'm just gonna say it how the Lord gave it to me, so put the pieces where it may fit for you. Your spouse was on the devil's path, and so were you once upon a time, right? You left the devil's path and got on the path towards Jesus Christ. Your spouse had the option, just like it was given to you, to choose which path they wanted to take. They were slower going than you because one of the two spouses had to move first. It's just like with Adam and Eve. God didn't make them at the exact same time. God made Adam, then he made Eve, right? So in the context of that, the Lord shows me like that a spouse has to go first before the other. One follows suit, right? After the fact. So one first and then the other. So if you're a male, maybe you were the beacon, the light, the one that went off the devil's path and started to veer towards Jesus Christ, and you were now on the light side, and you were trying to attract your spouse or lead your spouse down the right path as well. And vice versa, if you were a woman, same thing, okay? And I've talked in the past videos about what that all, like, deeper onto that, about how the spouse moved and, you know, how they operated and things like that in my past words. But basically, you were your mission as your spouse's spouse was to lead your spouse towards the path of Jesus Christ, just like you did. It's almost like if you both were lost in the woods, you're equal. But if you're saying, hey, I found a way out, come this way, just follow the light, they have a choice to keep thinking that they know a better way. Oh no, that's not the right way. I know the right way. I have a compass here. I know what the right way is. But it's very obvious that you found the right way, because the right way is like a clear path that you can see very clearly, and there's a light shining, right? So it would be foolish for a person in that scenario to not follow the light and to follow the obvious clear path out, right? But of course, in the analogy of saying that, because this is how the Lord gives it to me, is like people being lost in the woods. Say you're lost in the dark woods and you've been lost there for a long time. All you want to do is get out, or so you would think, right? And so if you can get out, you can get to safety, you can get to water, you can get to, food, shelter, etc., right? But instead, your spouse, they think that they know the better way, okay? And so you tried to show them the way out, and you waited some more and a little bit more, and you kept waiting. And then when you tried to leave and you're like, you know what, you just stay here lost in the woods because I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm thirsty, I've been in these woods for too long, I clearly see the path and the light, I'm going that way. If you think you know a better way, you go ahead, but you've tried your way, I've waited for you and attempted your way, and all it's led us back is back to the same point again, over and over, going in circles. I'm going to take the right path. And so then you start to head that way. There was many times that the Lord just brought you back and was like, it's almost like the Lord let you go halfway out and was like, no, you got to go back and get your spouse now. You know, they're lost without you, they're lonely without you, go back and get your spouse. So you would constantly go back to get your spouse, right? Not because you wanted to, because you were torn. Moving forward meant moving towards shelter, food, and water when you've been lost in the woods for so long. And again, of course, this is just an analogy, but the Lord says it fits perfectly. Or your choice is to turn around and go without, sacrifice, go without your comfort, your water, your food, and go back for your spouse. Someone who clearly is foolish and choosing to just go around in circles. That's a tough call to make, right? The Lord is saying 98% of the population wouldn't, they'd be in such dire straits, they would just continue on towards the light because they would want to take care of themselves, right? But because the Lord takes care of you, he said, I will sustain you. He wanted to test you to see if you would continually go back for your spouse, sacrifice yourself to be obedient to the Lord, because the Lord is basically telling you, it's just like when the Lord asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. The Lord wasn't going to actually have Abraham do it. He just wanted to test him and see if he was going to be obedient enough to follow through, right? And then Abraham was going to, and at the last minute, the Lord said, no, it was just a test. So the Lord had been doing the same thing to you for a duration of time. Could have been months, could have been years, where the Lord was showing you the way out, and you were enticed and wanting to save yourself because you saw it clearly. You wanted to come out of these proverbial woods, but the Lord kept, nudging at you to turn around when you get halfway out already. And you're like, really, Lord? Like, can't they just come already? I have to continuously double back for this person. And it'd be totally different if they were on board, but they're not. I go back, and every time I go back, they're still walking around in the circles with their compass, thinking that they got this better way out, when I've walked those circles with them and discovered that this is the only way out. There's literally no other way. And The Lord's like, yes. Why? Because the Lord was testing your obedience to the Lord, right? And you were willing to sacrifice your better interest for the Lord, to obey the Lord every single time, just like Abraham was with his son, okay? So because of that, the Lord, you have like brownie points with the Lord because of that, right? AKA blessings. So you saw the right path, you were trying to take the right path, and to be obedient to the Lord, and no other reason, you continue to try to double back for your spouse. Because of that, the Lord, you know, I don't know how to explain it. He like held you in a favorite spot, like if he favored you because of the fact that you were doing that, right? Just like how he favored Abraham. Um, and so you kept going back, and the Lord was very patient with your spouse, kept giving your spouse more time, and the Lord just kept making it all the more obvious that you had the right formula, you had the path to success, you had the right solution, right? And to just follow you and trust you, just like you were trusting the Lord. But your spouse just fell into the devil's trap of pride and ego, and continued to think that they had a better strategy, and that you didn't know what you were talking about. Now, in regards to females, the reason why this message may resonate more so with you is because men have a tendency to think that women don't know, like there's the famous line where like the man's building something and the woman says, hey, read the instructions, and the guy's like, I don't need the instructions, and then halfway through he's like, okay, maybe I need the instructions. Or like the woman has the map and she's trying to tell him where to go, and he's like, I don't need a map, and then when they get lost he's like, okay, I need the map. So it's like that analogy where like men are like that to women sometimes, where they just assume that women don't know anything, like how to fix things, how to get out of a rut, how to re-navigate, whatever else. Men assume that they know more than women in that regard. And your spouse, if this is for a female in particular, was no different. Because of that manly testosterone nature, they assumed that you wouldn't. How on earth would you know the better way out when they've been doing what they've been doing for so long? They've been on their own for so long. They've never needed somebody before. They know what's up better than you. Okay, so that this message may apply. It applies for both, but it may resonate a little more for women, just simply because of that. Because typically, if men are going back for the woman in the same scenario, the woman wouldn't be so stubborn. She would trust the man and release, right? But the Lord is showing me that it's like a man not trusting the woman, and it's not because the woman's untrustworthy. It's because the man thinks, because of pride, that he knows more than her. But anyways, whatever. Moving on. So because of that, you and the Lord waited. The Lord waited, and there was a certain amount of allotted time that this spouse had to choose the right path, right? And the Lord continuously had you come halfway out and go right back. Come halfway out, go right back. And this, you may have noticed, this pattern was going on for quite some time, where you were almost in this holding stagnant pattern, because the Lord wouldn't let you leave, but when you went back, you couldn't stay. The Lord would lead you back out, because the Lord was trying to test you, but also the main goal was to bring you and your spouse out together, right? Because this was your spouse. You were supposed to be together and walk out of these woods, being lost in the woods, which is like the wilderness, by the way, into your promised land, which is the crossover, which is to leave these, scary, dead, dark, cold woods behind, which is the world and the devil's path that you'd been on all this time. You finally found the path out, which is the light of Jesus Christ. You were following it. You had been following it. Your mission was to bring your spouse with you, okay? Now, some may look at it as that you failed your mission because you didn't bring your spouse with you, but that's not what happened. The Lord considers you favored, and you're a winner because of the fact that you you did what the Lord asked you to do. Even though you didn't bring your spouse out like what the Lord intended, the Lord knew beforehand that your spouse wasn't going to come out, right? The Lord knew that. Or maybe your spouse will come out, but the Lord is leaving them to their own devices. The patience level of the Lord has ran dry. That's why I made the word about the sands in the hourglass are running out. And that's what I meant, is that the sands of the hourglass was the Lord's patience and the time frame that the Lord had allotted for your spouse. and your spouse wasted the entire time. And it was very frustrating for you. And then on top of it, to boot, okay, because your spouse may have came round, like the Lord is saying the odds were stacked against you. Intentionally, the Lord stacked the odds against you because it built up your resilience and your strength, taught you lessons, gave you wisdom, discernment, things like that, exercised your gifts, and strengthened and increased your anointing. So the Lord doesn't waste anything. He's very strategic. So therefore, if the Lord had you go down this road, it was for a reason, right? The Lord knew that you were going to exhaust yourself. The Lord knew that you were being obedient. The Lord knew that you were going to be the one leaving on your own, and that your spouse wasn't going to come through, and that they were going to waste all of the time. The Lord knew all this. But the Lord still wanted to test you anyway and grow you in the adversity anyway. And that's exactly what happened. So therefore, the Lord is saying that even though you didn't bring your spouse out, you won. Because the mission was to try to bring your spouse out, but the Lord knew that the spouse wasn't going to come out. Therefore, the big main key mission was to test your obedience level. And because you were obedient, therefore you get the crown, you get the reward, you get the blessing, you get it all, because it was a twofold process. One was trying to bring your spouse out, but the Lord already knew it was like it was set up, it was already rigged. And then the second part was just to test your obedience and to grow you, and that happened. Your obedience was tested and you passed, and you grew in the process. So therefore, win for you. Plus, you get to now exit and leave these woods for good. Like, now the Lord is allowing you to pass. You had to wait for those sands in the hourglass to run up, and I put that word, I think, like 2 weeks ago. Those grains of sand have ran up. The time is out. It's over. So the Lord is like, okay, you proved to me, I tested you. You proved yourself obedient. You get to walk out of these woods now. You finally get to go and eat. You finally get to go and rest. You finally get to go and get a drink, because you were hungry, thirsty, and tired a year ago, months ago, and all you wanted was sleep, rest, food, and drink. And I denied you that intentionally to test your obedience. But now that the time has ran up, the lots have been cast, the spouse has chosen the devil's path and to stay stuck in the woods where they've always been, and you originally chose Jesus's path, and you're still choosing Jesus's path. I'm going to allow you to finally walk out of these woods and out of this wilderness into your promised land, and go and satisfy yourself and sustain yourself like you've been wanting to all this time, because you were doubling back and forth, right? So that's the reward. So the Lord is declaring you, if this message resonates for you, the Lord is declaring you a winner, irregardless of what the enemy is trying to suggest, because A, you obeyed the Lord. That was the test. You passed it. So there's rewards for obedience. B, the Lord saw that you were willing to sacrifice not only for the Lord, but also for your spouse. And so therefore, the Lord has deemed you, the Lord knew that you were the most worthy person for your spouse. You were the gift. The Lord has double wrapped you as a gift now. Now your value in regards to your spouse has doubled. Your anointing has doubled. So if you were already a blessing in your spouse's world, now you're a double blessing. Even if your spouse doesn't see that now, the Lord is saying that they will. The time for that will be coming, because what the spouse doesn't understand is that they were in the woods alone, yes, but that you kept doubling back for them, right? So maybe you departed for a little while as you were leading down this path of Jesus Christ on your way out, but the Lord brought you right back, and then you go out and He bring you right back. So this spouse has never actually been stuck in these woods all by themselves, because you were there from the beginning. You and them were in these woods together. Then you started to take a different path, but you didn't leave completely. You kept coming back for them and to check on them, and then go and then come back, right? And this back and forth went on for quite some time. So the Lord is saying that the spouse expected you to come back every time, because you had continued to come back. So picture the scenario of if you were really truly in the woods, lost with someone, and they're like, well, enough with you and your path. You have no clue what you're doing. I'm taking this way. And they start to head that way. You might be scared at first because you think that they'd left you. But if you see that they're on their way back in a short amount of time, and then you're like, oh, okay, you came back. And so then, the next day you try on the path again, then you come back, right? this spouse was expecting and anticipating your return every time, because the Lord had you returning every time. But the Lord said, not this time. Not this time. This was the 11th hour, the final pass, the final try, and that was it. That's it. So now what it's at is this spouse is left stuck in these woods, in this wilderness, all by themselves. The path of light is still there. The Lord will never stop shining. It's impossible for the Lord to stop shining his path of light, right? And the Lord wants the spouse just like he wants to save everybody. So therefore his path of light will always be there. But the way and the clarity and everything has been muted. It's not off, but it's muted, because the only thing that kept that path open was you. And the Lord has removed you. The Lord has allowed you, because it's not fair to you. You've passed your test. For the Lord to continue after you've passed your test, to have you go without your food and your drink and your rest, is like torture, right? And the Lord's not going to do that. So it reached its threshold. It reached its measuring point. Therefore, now the Lord is going to allow you to cross over alone, go into your promised land alone, and your spouse is going to stay stuck and lost in these woods and wilderness alone. And like I said, I had put that word out like a week or two or something ago, saying that, like, the lots have been cast, like the Lord says. It is what it is. You can't go back into the wilderness. The Lord won't allow it. And the spouse cannot, expect for your anticipate and expect for your return, because you're not returning. So eventually, the Lord is saying that at this time, the spouse is sitting there waiting for you to come back, because you have so many times waiting, like how you were waiting on the spouse to come, right? The tables have turned. And the Lord is saying eventually the spouse is going to see that they're stuck out in those woods all by themselves. The light path has dimmed. The clarity has dimmed, because you're not there. And not only are they waiting for you to come back, just like you were waiting for them to follow you, you're not coming back. And not only that, you're already gone off to go and get blessed, okay? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean it's the end forever and ever between you and your spouse. But the Lord brought you to your spouse as their helpmate, their helper, to help lead them out of these woods together. You all were supposed to leave the woods together and go to promised land together, okay? But because of the spouse's choices, the Lord had no other choice. He's not going to continue to punish you, so to speak, when you're being obedient. You know what I'm saying? It's no different than when you have children, because the Lord always compares us to children. If you're a parent, you might be upset with one child's actions, but not the other child. The other child's being obedient and being good, but the other child is acting up and being disobedient. You have issue with one of the children, not both of them. The one that's being good deserves a reward. The one that's being bad deserves a consequence. But sometimes, if, say, you take away the TV in the house, just say, or something like that, to punish or consequence the one child that's acting up, then the other child suffers unintentionally, because they both share the TV, right? But as a parent, maybe you don't have any other course of punishment to discipline the unruly child, so therefore you take away the TV to teach them that lesson. However, unfortunately, it's also kind of teaching the good child a lesson, because they only have one TV and they share it, right? Do you see? I know it's kind of weird, but like, that's what the Lord is saying, is that's kind of what it was like. And then eventually the parent's going to go to the store and say, well, I gave you both chances and you're still being bad and you're still being good. So I'm going to go, now that I've saved up some money, I'm going to go buy another TV, a separate TV. And that one's going to be your sibling's TV, my good child's TV. And they get to watch that TV by themselves. And you, being the unruly child, you just don't get TV, because it's not fair to continue to punish your brother or sister, my other child, my good child, for the bad child's actions, right? Like, it's just, I know it's kind of simple, but that's how the Lord is saying, like, to make it make sense. That's how he's showing it to me, is that's what it's like. So the Lord is going to have that separation. So because you've proven yourself despite a loss of something, the Lord has come up with a strategy to where he's separating you and your spouse intentionally not to hurt you per se at all. You're actually being rewarded. It's to separate the unruly one, the wicked one, from the righteous and good one, right? So I hope that makes sense. So there's that, okay? So at this time, if this message resonates with you, your spouse is stuck in these woods and wilderness, the devil's path, by themselves. They are still waiting for you to come back, but you're not, okay? And the Lord is causing a wedge so that you continue to move forward down the light path, the path of Jesus Christ, and that your spouse starts to in time realize that they're stuck there alone, okay? Now, to make things, so that's part one, okay? The second part is that to make things seem easier on them, the spouse has went and called in counterfeits to come and be in the woods with them. The only reason why this could be successful was because these counterfeits were in the wilderness and woods on the devil's path, just like they were. So picture there's you and your spouse originally, okay? You're on the devil's path, the path of the world, the path of darkness together, right? Because once upon a time you were in and of the world. You chose to look for the path of light, and because of that, Jesus Christ came and made a path of light and clarity to you, and you wanted to follow that light, like we already talked about, okay? Because your spouse didn't choose to follow that light completely like you did, they made some advancements, but then they'd go back, and then some advancements and go back. The spouse instead attracted counterfeits that were also on the dark path, the devil's path, the path of the woods, into their life, okay? So then, and the devil allowed this, so the Lord allowed this because he wanted your spouse to basically bury themselves, basically, you know, chop off that old saying, cut your nose to spite your face. That's basically what the Lord was going to allow the spouse to do, because the Lord was basically like, okay, you don't want to follow the path of light, you want to continue to be stubborn, I will let you bring in your counterfeits, but they're actually going to do you more harm than good, right? And so that was kind of what was happening. The spouse was in the dark, and all the spouse was doing was trying to bring in more darkness. So therefore, all that happened was the dark just got darker. It didn't serve your spouse in any way, shape, or form, right? And it also didn't touch you either, because you were the one that already found this light path, okay? So that's that. So your spouse was attracting these counterfeits. Now, I've talked about this several times. The counterfeits look like partners, yes, but they also look like addictions. They look like unhealed wounds. They look like childhood traumas. They look like sinful things like pride, greed, jealousy, lust, things like that. Like sin cycles, basically. So yeah, these are all some of the examples. Bad friends, bad opportunities, bad choices. These were some of the counterfeit, dark, devil's path things that the counterfeit attracted, being in the dark, and the Lord allowed the spouse to bring into their darkness, because dark attracts dark, right? Light attracts light, dark attracts dark. So it's only fitting. Plus, the Lord was just allowing the spouse to be encompassed with the very things that they thought that they needed to try to teach your spouse and show your spouse a lesson, like how the Lord was teaching and showing you a lesson, right? You and your spouse were learning lessons at the same time, but some of them were in different ways. Some of the things they were learning you already knew, and some of the things you were learning they already knew or hadn't yet were ready to learn. So you were learning different things at different times in different ways, okay? So now, this brings me to the second part of this message, is about the counterfeit, the key counterfeit. So these are the counterfeit things that your spouse was attracting. But in particular, there was one specific counterfeit. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this message, this counterfeit could have been an ex-partner of your spouse. It could have been someone that you knew that intentionally tried to go after your spouse, because at one point in time they were trying to go after and against you. It could have been somebody who your spouse knew through mutual friends, like in their friend circle, something like that, an acquaintance. But either way, it doesn't matter. The purpose of this main counterfeit was they were sent by the devil. Okay, it doesn't matter the association really per se, but the main theme is that no matter who this main counterfeit was specifically, they were directly sent by Satan. Okay, because Satan knew that you and your spouse were in these proverbial woods, and that you were leaving the devil's path to head towards the path of Jesus Christ, and that you were also simultaneously on mission to bring your spouse with you, and the devil knew this. So therefore, the devil sent in this main counterfeit, and the Lord allowed the devil to do this because, like I already said, the Lord was trying to show your spouse that these anything other than you, any other person other than you, is just dark. Any other path other than the path you're on is just dark. Your way was the only way. It was the only correct and right way. Why? Because it was the path of Jesus Christ. So therefore, there's only one true way out of our proverbial woods and wilderness, and that's the path of Jesus. And you found that path. That's why you were able to start escaping the woods and wilderness after all your years of being in it. And therefore, you were on the right path. Therefore, you were the right solution, the right person for them at the right time, on the right path, the right way. Everything about you was right. Why? Because everything about Jesus Christ and God was right for you and the spouse. Okay? But this spouse thought that their way was better. They thought they knew better. So the Lord's like, okay, you're snubbing my person, yes, but you're not necessarily snubbing them. You're actually snubbing me, because the way that they're trying to lead you to go isn't their way per se. It's my way. And I wanted you both to follow it. So you were being obedient, but your spouse was being disobedient. So therefore, the Lord, we look at when the Lord is saying that we can look at people in the world and we think that when they're blessed, and I say that with quotation marks, that looks like when they get to have all this indulgence that they're blessed. That's how people in the world look at being blessed, as indulgences is blessed. But the Lord is actually saying, actually, in reality, that's the delusion right there. That's the scam, because sometimes too much of something bad is, of what we think is good that's actually bad, is going to make things worse. So what I mean is, say for instance, we think that sugar has a lot of flavor. Cupcakes and donuts and ice cream is tasty, right? But yet potatoes and broccoli and celery isn't as flavorful as ice cream and donuts and cakes are. But if you overfill yourself with celery and broccoli and potatoes, you're not going to gain weight. You're going to have lots of energy. You're going to get good sleep at night. You're going to never get sick. Your immune system will be top notch, right? You'll get a lot of rewards eating the less flavorful, healthy options. But if you indulge yourself in cakes and chocolates and cookies, you're eating food that tastes good to you. Yes, it satisfies the palate. It's tasty. But in no time, you're going to start to get toothaches, diabetes, indigestion, poor sleeping, gain weight, breakouts, etc. You know what I'm saying? So even though sugary sweets look good and taste good, and by comparison to vegetables, they seem like the more tempting option, in reality, you can go indulge all day, but if Bob indulges in veggies, they're going to feel great. And if Tom indulges in sweets, they're going to feel bad. And so that's what the Lord is saying, is that the Lord is saying sometimes he allows the wicked indulgences. He gives them what they want, because they end up hurting themselves with it in the long run, and they have no one else to blame but themselves. So the spouse thought, with that analogy said, the spouse thought that when they were being surrounded by these counterfeit things, aka false friends, all kinds of different options when it came to the opposite sex, counterfeit partners, counterfeit opportunities, addiction, sin cycles. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, I got this made over here. Like, I'm watching you and you're going back and forth on this path of light, and you're still hungry, you're still thirsty. The Lord there, Jesus Christ, isn't allowing you to rest, or not. He's not allowing, God and Jesus, they're not allowing you to rest. They're not allowing you to recuperate. Meanwhile, I'm sitting over here in my easy chair, indulging. Like, this is clearly the best way. And that's kind of how your spouse was looking at you and thinking that what you were doing was cuckoo, because it wasn't leading you to anything. So, but meanwhile, so you're choosing the path of vegetables and they're choosing the path of sweets, and they're like almost to you, like, why are you, torturing yourself? Like, you know what I mean? Like, not satisfying yourself. Why are you not treating yourself, hurting, sacrificing and suffering yourself? Like, they couldn't understand that. So therefore, they thought that they made the better choice. They were smarter than you. They had the smarter choice by sitting in the easy chair in the woods, stuck, lost, in the dark, overindulging in these counterfeit things, okay? So, anyways, you continued to do what you were doing because it was obedient to the Lord, and that to you was key. So, meanwhile, the devil had sent in this main counterfeit person, okay? And the main mission that you had, that the devil knew about, was to try to get your spouse away from the devil's path and onto the path of Jesus Christ. But this counterfeit's mission was to do the opposite, was to try to distract and deter your spouse from getting on the path of Jesus Christ, but staying stuck in the woods like they already were, spinning in circles with them, overindulging with them, and overindulging in all these other dark things that they had mutual attractions for, mutual interest for, because of the fact that, not because they're more compatible than you and the spouse, because they're not, but because, like, bad mixes with bad, dark mixes with bad, dark attracts dark, light attracts light, right? And so if in this scenario you're the only light thing and your spouse is dark, of course a dark counterfeit is going to attract your spouse, and of course your spouse is going to be attracted by a dark counterfeit because they're both in the dark, and then therefore you look like the oddball because you're the only one that's not sitting down in the easy chair indulging in these dark things, right? And they can't understand what you're doing. So therefore you became like some sort of a joke or ridiculousness or whatever. And so this counterfeit spent a great amount of time while this was going on for you. You're learning these lessons and going back and forth, doubling back, and it's looking like you're just exhausting yourself and wasting all this time for no reason. This counterfeit and your spouse are overindulging with themselves, each other, and in these dark things, okay? And they're scoffing at you and mocking at you and scratching their head at you because they don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, okay? But the Lord is saying that was in the past. Now that the grains of sand of the hourglass have came to the end and the Lord has cast the lots and done the separation, you are now going to move forward into that promised land, into that light, and finally get out of these woods for good, okay? So you're finally going to get your indulgences that you've been waiting for and that's been promised to you, but you had to endure your testing time first. You've proven yourself worthy. You are now the victor. Like, it's no different than when they play those survivor games. The last one standing wins. Like, the one that finds the way out wins, right? Kind of like Amazing Race. Like, it's the one that gets through it all, the obstacles, and gets it to the very end that wins. So coming out of those woods, finding the path of light, and enduring through the test and the back and forth and the self-sacrifice and the obedience and the focus and determination, that was the race, so to speak. And then coming out of it and having the door lifted and the ways parted, or the Red Sea parted, and you walking through onto dryness towards all your food and all your rest and all your bounty. That is the winner. That's the winner. That's the winning strategy. That's the exit. That ding, 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 you're the winner. Okay. Those that didn't do that stayed stuck in the dark, in the woods, indulging, they're the losers. And as a result, you've already gone off and they're stuck there. And so your spouse is starting to see you're not coming back for them anymore. And they got stuck with this counterfeit. And they couldn't see it was a counterfeit until you, the representation of the light, went off on your merry way. That's the only way. The Lord didn't want to leave your spouse to their own devices, but the Lord had no other choice. The spouse chose what they chose, okay? And this counterfeit didn't win nothing, because they came, when they came into your spouse's into the situation, so to speak, they were already filled by the devil. That's how they came into in the first place, was because the devil sent them. they were already indulging in these dark counterfeit things of the world, like your spouse was. And so your spouse is no further ahead now than they were a year ago, and this counterfeit is no further ahead than they were a year ago. Meanwhile, you're the only one out of the mix that got out of these dark, lost, cold woods and found your way to the light and salvation and victory, right? And now you're going to go and receive your bounty while these ones are stuck in these woods still. They've wasted time, they've wasted effort and energy, they're no further ahead, and maybe it's it's getting clear as the days are going by. It's clearer now than it was, in the past, but the clarity level still hasn't been fully reached, that they haven't seen that they basically kicked their own butt. They basically dug their own pit. And I put out this word before, like, they didn't do anything to you, they didn't stop anything, all they did was fall for the devil's schemes, and now the devil's laughing at them, because the devil's like, ha ha ha, it worked, I sent this counterfeit in because I control this counterfeit, and I was able to get the spouse to not follow the path of Jesus Christ, and I successfully was able to delusion and confuse these people that I puppeteer. I'm the puppeteer that I puppet them. I was able to successfully thwart their opportunities of salvation and victory, right? That's how the devil sees it. And the Lord has put this counterfeit and these counterfeit things in this spouse under his wrath. Because at the end of the day, the Lord is very cut and dry. The Lord's like, there's the dark path and there's disobedience. There's the light path and there's obedience. One way's wrong, one way's right. And only one person chose the right choice. And so therefore, blessings for obedience, discipline for disobedience, right? So now your spouse and this counterfeit are going through discipline for disobedience. This counterfeit should not have been doing what they were doing, and the spouse should not have been doing what they were doing. And it's because this counterfeit was stubborn and this spouse was stubborn, and that's because they're ran and controlled by the devil. So now they are in the mix together. So what's happened is that the Lord is using them to cancel each other out, because the dark attracts dark. So the Lord's like, okay, counterfeit, you wanted to sabotage and compete and cause darkness and destruction. Okay, that's exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get darkness and destruction. You'll get your wish. And okay, spouse, you want to be stubborn, you want to be prideful, you want to be egotistical and think that your way was best and you knew more than me. Okay, then I'll show you what your pride and your arrogance has earned you. I'll give you both your wish. Your spouse wanted indulgences. There's your indulgences, spouse. This counterfeit wanted to destroy things. Okay, go sit in the destruction that you caused then. And so it's of no harm or foul on you. The Lord has already parted the ways and brought you out into victory and into the promised land alone and into your abundance. The only winner here was you, because you followed the path of Jesus Christ, because there was only one way that was right out. This spouse and this counterfeit have lost. They thought that they won. The spouse was like, oh good, they're gone, they're on their merry way, I get to stay back and indulge in peace and quiet. And this counterfeit's like, yay, I won the prize, I get to be with the spouse now. But the Lord is showing this counterfeit that this spouse in this darkness is not a prize. And the Lord is showing this spouse that this counterfeit in the darkness is not a prize. And the only way that the counterfeit knows that this spouse is not a prize is because the only light that this spouse carried, if ever they had some, was because of the light path that the Lord had illuminated in these proverbial woods that you were on. Had you have not been on this path and made this choice, there would have been no light there at all, period. Okay? So if there was any light that attracted this counterfeit to this spouse, that light is gone, because that light was supplied by you and the path of Jesus Christ. And so this spouse, or this counterfeit, thought they were winning a prize when you were still doubling back for your spouse, because the light they saw was actually coming from you. But now that you're gone, this counterfeit and the darkness is fully encompassed. This counterfeit is starting to see that this spouse is no prize. There was nothing special. If there was something special, it was because of the light being shone into the situation by the light of Jesus Christ and by yourself as the vessel. You were the blessing. You were it, not them. Okay? And the Lord is saying your spouse is going to start to see that too. Okay? So therefore, and okay, so the Lord is telling me that this counterfeit is going through the very same thing that they did to you, because that's how it works. If we're good people and we're righteous and we're holy, we don't suffer karma. And if we do suffer karma, all we're going to get back is being good, righteous, and holy, because we were being good, righteous, and holy, right? The Lord is saying it's only when we're bad and unrighteous and wicked and stubborn and all this other stuff that's sent by the devil, prideful, arrogant, etc., that we get back pride, arrogance, destruction, etc., right? So this counterfeit had came in, sent by the devil to cause destruction, okay? This counterfeit thought that they had successfully caused destruction when you went off your merry way, when the Lord pushed you through the open door, okay? They thought that they won and that mission complete. Aha, reward me, devil, I completed my mission. But the Lord is saying, ha ha ha, joke's on you. The devil doesn't reward anybody, and the devil doesn't work for anybody but God, just like the rest of us, and that God will always have the upper hand and come out the winner every time, and so will his people, okay? So the Lord is saying that the counterfeit is starting to see that all they really did was hurt themselves, that there was a grave or a pit that they were trying to dig for you to fall into, a trap for you to fall in, but ultimately the Lord's the one that, gave them a push into that, and they're starting to see that they did this to themselves. So there is no prize for this counterfeit and this spouse. The way out was the way out. That was the winning spot. That was the prize, and neither of them chose to take it. And so now they're stuck. The spouse is stuck in these woods, and they're stuck with their indulgences, all the things that they chose and thought were better over you and the Lord and the Lord's path that he had for them. And this counterfeit is stuck with the very prize that they thought they wanted to win. Oh, they've won it all right, but they're starting to see it was not a prize. And I mean, it is what it is. So this counterfeit, male or female, in your spouse's life has gotten back everything they gave. They were laughing and scoffing at you and what you were doing, but the door's been shut, and now they realize that they're the ones that are cold, dark, and alone in these woods. And they're stuck with somebody who's not meant for them, who doesn't care about them, who only used and abused them, so to speak, emotionally, mentally, financially, spiritually, physically, whatever the way may be, because that person's only chance at light and being saved and changed was through you in the path of Jesus Christ, and they snubbed it. And this counterfeit helped this spouse snub the path. So they're both under judgment. The spouse is under the judgment for disobeying the Lord's plan and purpose and scoffing at you as their gift and blessing. And this counterfeit is under wrath for trying to sabotage and destroy and for mocking at you and trying to enforce and ensure that this spouse didn't get on board like they were supposed to. So this counterfeit thought they were successful, but the counterfeit doesn't realize, because they lack wisdom and discernment, that the devil's the one that sent them in, and that the Lord allowed the devil to send them in because the Lord wanted this counterfeit and this spouse to bury themselves, right? Because that's karma. And again, I know that's a new age term, but the Lord makes me use it sometimes in these words, because he's saying a lot of these situations with the path of the world and the devil's path, they are involved in new age. They understand new ageology more than they understand Jesus Christ. So therefore, these are words that apply to their mindset and their perceptions, okay? And so, meaning that someone could sit and read scripture to them all day, but because they're ran by the devil, they ignore all of that. It goes in one ear and out the other, if it even hits the ears at all. But they understand new age terminology and new age perspective. So therefore, for lack of a better word, to make it as simple as possible, it's karma. It's karma, right? You get what you give, you reap what you sow. Because this counterfeit wanted this spouse to snub you, this counterfeit is being snubbed. because this counterfeit wanted this spouse to, stay indulging, this spouse is indulging. So this counterfeit wanted, when you were still in the picture before the Lord removed you, the counterfeit wanted this spouse to continue, drinking, drugging, partaking in sin cycles, lust, things like that, to try to deter and distract your spouse from coming to you. And now that you're gone and this counterfeit is in the mix with this spouse, the very tactics that the counterfeit got the spouse to use against you are the very tactics that the Lord is having come right back on to the counterfeit. So the counterfeit was sent by the devil with a mission to try to distract your spouse, to get your spouse drinking and drugging and caught up in lust and all this, and going out and partying and all this stuff, to try to deter them from taking the path that you're on, the path of Jesus Christ. So, okay, good, very well then. Now this counterfeit is in the mix with this spouse and you're not there. But now the very same tables have turned to where now, sure, okay, the Lord's like, okay, counterfeit, you wanted the spouse to drink? Well, now the spouse is drinking. You wanted the spouse to partake in lust? Okay, well, now the spouse is partaking in lust. All the very things, tactics that the counterfeit used on your spouse to try to get your spouse to stay stuck in the darkness with them and not take the path that was with you to go into the promised land, are the very things that the counterfeit is now having to deal with. Why? Because of karma, right? So think about it. If someone is trying to get somebody, say, with a proverbial weapon to shoot at you, right, and you run away and you're gone, that person still has a weapon and an intent to shoot, and the person has enticed them to do so. So who do you think they're going to turn that weapon on? You know what I'm trying to say? So it's that same kind of analogy. It's like this counterfeit is the one that got the spouse to act this way, to do these things, to think like this. The counterfeit, amongst other things too, but the Lord is mainly speaking about this counterfeit. This counterfeit had enticed and encouraged your spouse to operate in a certain fashion, which was the devil's fashion, because this counterfeit operated in the devil's fashion. And it was all well and good and great when these bullets, so to speak, were aimed at you, but now that you're gone and away and off to your promised land as the victor, off with your main man Jesus Christ, the only people left stuck with all this sin and unrighteous ways and like turmoil and calamity and drama and everything is this spouse and counterfeit, because you were like a flashlight shining a flash of light into the situation, and they took that for granted. They mocked it. They sabotaged it. So therefore that's been taken, and now it's just completely dark. Okay? So I hope this makes sense. So in conclusion, if this message resonates for you, and some of the past words have, if you found yourself in the past on the kingdom spouse journey, and perhaps you still are, but either way, if the Lord has removed you from the spouse and that middleman position where you were kind of going back and forth, trying to go out but then double back for your spouse, the Lord either already has or will be crossing you over and moving you out into the promised land, into the clarity and the light and the bounty that was promised to you, that you've been trying to make your way to for a long time, because you've passed your tests and proven yourself to the Lord. Just like how in the Bible in Genesis, Abraham was tested to see if he'd sacrifice his son, and when the Lord saw that he was going to, the Lord told him, no, stop, and favored and blessed him from there on. He just wanted to see what he would do. Would he sacrifice? You did and still do care about this spouse, and you were willing to sacrifice your own needs, to satisfy yourself for this spouse. Why? Because that's true love. That's what true love does. You don't just sit in the mix with your quote-unquote spouse and be toxic and encourage them to be toxic and then go, just share this mutual toxicity. That's not love. Love is being patient. Love is being generous, and forgetting certain things in the way to bypassing it to try to for the betterment of yourself and your spouse. That's love, right? And so you actually were showing the spouse more true love by going back for them, by putting your wants and needs on hold for them. You also proved your love to Jesus Christ by being obedient to him, and Jesus and the Father have recognized that, and they will reward you as such. And this spouse is stuck where they're at, and maybe they think that everything worked out for them, everything worked out for the best, but the Lord is saying they're going to see in due time that you're not coming back like you have so many times that they've taken for granted, and that it's going to be a stark reality when they realize they're stuck in their own mess, in their own filth, that they chose over you in the path of Jesus Christ, and it's going to consume them. It's in and of itself, because the darkness consumes. That's what it does, right? And that the only way that there was any light in the spouse's situation and in this counterfeit situation and their situation together was being provided by you and the light of Jesus Christ, and that light is gone now. And these two and others that are involved are going to eventually start to see things for how they really truly are. But it is what it is. It's too late. The Lord has already, shut the door on them and opened the door for you, right? And then with this counterfeit, they're getting back everything they gave. If they were trying to entice your spouse to cheat on you and to stray on you, they're being cheated and strayed on. If they were trying to entice your spouse to sneak around behind your back and lie to you, they're being snuck around on and they're being lied to. If they were trying to encourage and entice your spouse to string you along and to play games with you, they're being strung along and having games played on them. Every single thing that the devil gave them as a tactic to try to thwart this spouse from leaving the devil's path and heading on the path of light with you to the promised land together, they are now getting back from this spouse. They thought, because the devil tricked them and made them think that if they get you out of the mix, that then they can go off and ride off into the sunset and it'll be this, that, and the third. No. It was never intended that. The Lord had you and your spouse in this wilderness and woods first, okay? It wasn't a third-party situation. It just like when God made Adam and Eve, it wasn't Adam and Eve and John or Adam and Eve and Christine. It was Adam and Eve. There was the two of them, period, right? It's the same thing. The Lord had you and your spouse on this journey and in these woods originally together. You in time chose the path of light, and you had a choice as well. And your spouse had a choice as well. You chose right, they chose wrong, and they're going to start to see that in due time. And you are going to cross over and go on to everything that you deserve for being the victor in Jesus Christ. And this counterfeit and these other counterfeit things may have came along and thought that they were successful, but the Lord is saying that he's starting to reveal to them that they actually, when they thought they were trapping you all along and laughing and snickering, they're going to come to discover that they actually just trapped themselves. So hopefully they can, the situation works out for the best for everyone involved, and the Lord is very strategic. He knows what he's doing at all times. So therefore, maybe this is what's required for your spouse in this counterfeit to, find their own way out of the wilderness, right? And it's not going to change that you are the gift, you are the blessing as we speak, and you were the gift and the blessing for this spouse. And just because they thought that they didn't recognize you for who you were, they thought they were smarter, that they knew better, that how in the world could you know more? They're going to start to discover and see that they were wrong, and they were wrong all along. So I hope this message finds who it was intended to find. I hope it makes sense. Those who have ears to hear will hear. Those who it's for will understand. And if the Lord gives me more information on this, I'll be back. But just know that if this fits for you, the Lord is going to finally allow you to move forward, and you're going to get everything that was promised to you that you've been waiting on. Maybe things didn't go how you thought they were going to, but they're still going to go how they're supposed to, right? The Lord makes no mistakes. And pray for this counterfeit and this spouse that they, come to find their own way out of this wilderness, because as we speak, they're still stuck there. And they're actually worse off now than they were before, because before they weren't sabotaged the Lord yet. but they have done that since, right? And yeah, just, just also rest assured and know that this counterfeit in your spouse's life and these counterfeit things, they're going to just get back what they gave out. So if they gave out bad, they're going to receive bad. Whatever they put out is going to come back to them. And the Lord is just showing things for what they really are. It's we've reached the middle of the year. It's time for things to be exposed. It's time for the spouse to be exposed. It's time for you to be exposed, and it's time for this counterfeit to be exposed. So I hope this finds you well. Take care. God bless.